Okay, tayo po ay nagsasama-sama ngayon sa isang very exciting point in history. Itong nakaraang araw po, nagkagulo po sa Kabul Airport at nag-collapse po ang gobyerno na itinatag ng mga Amerikano 20 years ago diyan sa Afghanistan. At yung excitement isang araw, pero actually in a few more days it will settle down. We will see where it will go, whether there will be more excitement or there will be serious adjustment now for governance in Afghanistan. Iba-iba po ang projection. Si Bobby Tiglao, ang kanyang column, sinasabi, will it become, the question, will it become the beacon for global jihadism or something to that effect, I'm hoping for the best because everybody learns naman, and we will see if they have evolved itong Taliban over the past 2 decades. Pero alam po ninyo, yung unang attempt at reforming Afghanistan by the USSR or by the Soviets, the Soviet Union, with a socialist leader, si Najibullah, if I remember, pronounce her name correctly. That was the right nation building along socialist lines. And ang problema po, kaya po hindi nagtagumpay yung effort ng Russia or Soviet Union at that time, dahil nga sa bilyong-bilyong binuhos ng Estados Unidos sa pinaka mga violenteng mga elemento ng Afghanistan, mga criminals and so on that formed into the forces that Osama bin Laden used against the Soviet Union. Unfortunately for the Americans, it has come back to roost, yun din ang kumagat sa kanila. Well, that is our first segment po today dito sa ating opinion ngayon sa Golden Nation Network. We will be discussing this. So, first thing I want to clarify, and of course, in a short while, we'll ask our analyst, Maestra Ana Malindog-Uy, and former diplomat Adolfo Minawan to join us. Let me just lay the framework sa ating diskusyon. Sinasabi ngayon by all the accounts about Afghanistan that the Americans went in to capture bin Laden, to stop terrorism, and so on. The fact is, the Taliban who were controlling government at that time offered to Bush to turn over Osama bin Laden. Who is Osama bin Laden? Not everybody today knows him. But in 2001, his name was on everybody's lips because of the attack on World Trade Center, which he denies being part of. But we will explain a little more as we go along. So actually, there was no reason for Bush to go into Afghanistan. But Bush and his team, his clique, needed a war, wanted a war. Katatalo lang ng USSR 10 years before that, in 1989, nag-collapse ang Soviet Union. By 1995, the Americans were dreaming of global domination. They have the project study for it, done by the likes of Richard Pearl. These are some names I'm throwing, so maybe yung mga gusto mag-research, I can go into that. Paul Wolfowitz, and I think Adolf can add to these little tidbits of history. They produced a document called Project for a New American Century, PNAC, PNAC. And this was a project for global domination of the US. And this document said, we need a new Pearl Harbor, isang trigger at isang dahilan para mabigyan ang US government, US state at military ng rason para salakayin, lusubin ang ilang mga bansa sa mundo para makontrol ang mundo. And ipinanalo nila itong second Bush Jr., Bush Jr., because he was the one who would do the bidding of these clique of right-wing power mongers sa US. And tinalo nitong si Bush si Al Gore in 2001 in the 2001 elections by a Supreme Court decision, not by a majority vote. Ang majority vote po ay kay um, Al Gore at the time, pero ipinanalo to a Supreme Court decision in a Florida recount, itong si Bush. And Bush also then announced that they will target an axis of evil. And then, correct me if I'm wrong sa sequencing ko, Ado, baka you can remember some of these better than me. Then the World Trade Center attack happened. Two planes hit the iconic towers of New York, World Trade Center 1, World Trade Center 2, which they attributed to Osama bin Laden and the terrorists. But unfortunately, the facts do not support that because most of the terrorists that they call terrorists that maneuvered the plane or were identified with this attack were Saudi Arabians. I can go on and on for 2 hours to explain many details. I cannot because our time is only 25 minutes for this segment. But then, to make a long story short, Bush attacked Afghanistan, ousted the Taliban, put up a government with American-trained businessmen, scholars, and so on. And fast forward 20 years later to 2021, alam na natin lahat ang nangyari sa Afghanistan, sa Kabul. The Americans and President Biden said, we will have 60 days or more. I forget exactly, 60 days or 90 days, sabi niya, or maybe even 6 months for the transition. It took only weeks for the Taliban to enter Kabul. And we saw the scene. I'll show you the pictures, which most of you have seen, of course, siguro, sa news reports and sa internet, yung chaos sa Kabul Airport, yung sampahan ang mga tao doon sa tarmac at doon sa stairs to the airplane. The two Afghans who tied themselves, tinali nilang sarili nila sa wheels ng sa structure ng gulong ng eroplano pero nahulog ng mataas na po at namatay sigurado itong dalawa. And yung mga jam-packed planes that held 800. Now we can call them refugees, mga wala na pong mga bansa. Si Stephen Pavalinas has a very picturesque cartoon na makikita po ninyo yung nakakapit po sa mekanismo ng gulong ng C-130 ba yun or a bigger American planes, Well, this is another post by somebody. I do not know the original source. If we know, we will attribute it to them, but it really sums up the story. In 1985, the Afghans were fighting the Soviet invasion. These Afghans who were fighting the Soviets were called freedom fighters and funded by the Americans. Now, these same Afghans now in 2015 are called terrorists because they are fighting the US invasion. But now they are the ones in power in Kabul. The war in Afghanistan cost America $300 million a day for 20 years with big bills yet to come. The United States has spent more than $2 trillion on the war in Afghanistan. That's $300 million per day, every day for 20 years, for 2 decades, or $50,000 for each Afghanistan's 40 million people. Now, if they had spent it directly on each family of 5 members or $250,000, which is around 15 million pesos, wouldn't Afghanistan have really changed? No. They will not spend it on real people because they want to spend it in arms, planes, jet planes, warplanes, and so on. And Yeah, the other part of this image is the military spending. 20 companies profiting the most from war. I just put in the first 10. Most of them, 80%, are American companies, but there are British BAE Systems. Airbus Group is European Union. Thales Group is, I think, Italian. Leonardo is Italian. Airbus Group, well, I mentioned that. Thales Group, I think, is also French. I'm not sure. But then there's the Almar Ante, that's Russian. So not every American lost in this war. The American war industry won. And so, well, we are also affected. We are still formally an American ally today, hosting, because of the resumption of the VFA, U.S. military personnel in our bases, which is, of course, interpreted out by the outside world uh, um, as American bases. Kaya sabi ni Jason sa matutun sa karanasan, sa mga masyadong bilib sa kano, bilang takabagtanggol ng Pilipinas, mag-isip-isip kayo sa inabot ng mga bansang pinasok ng Amerika at iniwang warat ang bansa. And so I made this projection. Saigon, 1975, helicopter ferrying refugees out of the U.S. Embassy on the highest point of the embassy on top of that roof. Kabul, 2021, again, helicopters ferrying refugees out, American personnel, and so on. What about the Philippines? Maybe in 2030, maybe in 2035 with the VFA, we will not have helicopters ferrying people and escapees out anymore. It will be an atomic type conflict. Nobody escapes. So let us go now. Sorry for the long background, but it was necessary. Let us go to Maestra Ana and Kaado Paglinawan. We have around 15 minutes to analyze this. Maestra Ana.
Sa akin po, ang tingin ko sa nangyari dyan sa Afghanistan, it's like sabi ko nga sa post ko sa sa Facebook, it's actually the biggest blunder or the worst of all the blunders ng US. Yung pagka-talo, kasi talo sila. They were defeated by Afghanistan, by Taliban or from Afghanistan, and the same way that they were defeated by the Viet Cong or Vietnam. So yun yung hindi pa rin matanggap ng Amerika na yung ways nila of trying to export yung brand of democracy or system of government nila and cultural whatever to other countries, and even yung kanilang I don't understand this, no? Yung kanilang walang hanggan na gusto nila the world will be the same like them. That's pretty much their motivation as well, no? And of course, if you look at America in terms of industry, it's arms, no? One of the biggest, I think, industries. So the propensity for them to wage war is actually there, precisely because they benefit from it, financially speaking. So nandun din yon. Pero ang tanong kasi dyan, kapag nag-i-invade sila, they destroy the country. They don't even think of trying to build up the country. Sinakot mo na i-build up mo, walang ganon. Basta kung hindi na nila kaya, dahil I think right now they don't have enough resources to finance their wars in the Middle East. Kasi kulang na, and actually, mayroon na silang tinatawag na pivot to Asia because they want to be in Asia now, because you have Asia rising, with China being the leader there, rising economically. So they're shifting, they're pivoting, and they're in Asia. So iwanan nila yung Middle East. Iwanan nila kung nagkakalat yan. Maraming nangyari, devastation all, kahit women, men, lahat doon, civilian population, kasi tapos na sila doon. Kumbaga, and they will shift, and they will come here in Asia. Ang tanong, pag nandito sila sa Asia, will they do the same? Yun yung sinasabi ni Jason sa ating mga Pilipino. Parang ang sabi ko nga sa post ko na isa, shame on you if you fool me once. Shame on us if we will be fooled twice, thrice, and how many times? So that's much more, I think, the lessons learned here. That yes, we as Filipino, as a nation, we learn from examples of other countries, the experience of other countries, and we don't allow those negative experience that happens to us. Kaya ako
Yes.
nagpapasalamat kay President Duterte. Kasi from the very beginning, he really knows the Americans, and he knows na hindi siya papayag that we will be pushed to a war with China just because they want to be in this country. Though, andyan yung BFA, I understand the reasons behind that. It's because of vaccine. I'm doing a research right now, and there are a lot of publications that I've seen that actually the reason behind BFA was pushed through and continue is precisely of the vaccine, COVID-19 vaccine. Kasi we are held hostage eh. Hindi nila tayo binibigyan na kailangan natin kasi nga dito in Delta, ang dami nangyayari. So I think the president's just pragmatic about this. Pero if given the chance, I don't think the president will continue the PFA because he really knows the Americans. So that's my sentiment.
I have a question for you, which I will bring up after we go to Paado, and I'll come back to you asking the question. What about the sympathy of many people for the modern Afghan women? Mukhang magbuburka na naman sila, at ikukulong na naman sa bahay, wala na naman pag-aaral ng mga kababaihang bata, and so on. I'll get back to you on that question. Let's go to Kaado as a former diplomat and of course a geopolitical analyst, editor the website Sovereign PH. Kaado, your insights.
Ay, nako. Something always happens to powers on their way up. Yung mga hegemons kung tawagin, who wants world domination. In a very relevant analogy, this is what happened to the Greeks, this is what happened to the Romans, this is what happened to the Spaniards, the British, and now the United States. Proof lang na pagswapan ka, when you take too much, it becomes insatiable, this hunger for power. And the recent example, of course, is the US. Why, in the first place, it took the excuse of a weapon of mass destruction na alam naman nila ay wala ang Iraq, but they saw a target because of what was happening around the Bin Laden thing and the war in Afghanistan, and it was just to prove, that they could do it, that they could ambition to recreate America, spread democracy, and invaded Iraq for demonstration purposes. I'm taking this from an Al Jazeera op-ed, written by somebody from the SCAR School of Policy and Government at George Mason University, which is just my neighbor in the US. Nung panahon kasi na yan, I was actually at home watching television and preparing to fetch my wife in Washington. She was working in Grand Hyatt and in Washington, D.C., and I was fixing my things. And I saw this on TV. And as I was seeing it, my first instinct was to jump to the car and proceed to Washington, D.C. And just about the time that I was passing by the Pentagon, the second plane, actually the third, dalawa sa New York, yung pangatlo that was aimed at the Pentagon. Before that pala, yung one aimed for the White House, nag-revolution yung mga tao sa loob and it landed in Pennsylvania. Now, people are now saying, that this was really a demonstration to show Iraq, Libya, Iran, and North Korea who is the boss This is a case of American hegemony in its quest to be the world's superpower and the only superpower that could outstand anybody. But what has happened here? What has happened here is what happened to the Kurds, no? What happened to the Iraqis, what happened to the South Vietnamese. They found themselves being abandoned by the, this hegemon, which has become the biggest problem of the world right now.
Okay,
People are
Kado.
saying now that this is the end of the American era, and Afghanistan is Joe Biden's Saigon, and rightfully so.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes, and well, still, let's keep in mind that the U.S. is really geared towards the profits for the defense industry, a situation that their president Eisenhower in 1950 or 51 warned, the military-industrial complex. But let's go back to Ana with the 4 minutes left. Dito sa cultural crisis naman ng kababaihan sa Afghanistan, what is your reaction? What can be done? Nothing?
Okay. I was watching the press conference actually of the leaders of Taliban last night at around 12 midnight to 1 o'clock in the morning. They were saying that they recognize, no? They're saying that they recognize the rights and the role of women in the economy, in every aspect of Afghan life. However, they're also saying that they would allow this within the context of their religion, which is Islam. So I think that's the premise, no? So ano ko dyan, we really need to be very careful when we talk about human rights and when we talk about women empowerment and human rights, because countries have different contexts. It has different cultural makeup, and it has different religious activities and faith, no? So, ang mga concept na to, you cannot impose it because these are Western concepts, but you cannot impose it directly on people just like that. No, it has to be contextualized. It has to be part of the whole culture. Because the more you impose that, the more that things will just go out astray, no? Or will create chaos. Yun ang sinasabi ko lagi. Even when I was working in different countries, I always have this conflict with many people, especially the Western people, that I'm always telling them, you cannot impose things on these people precisely because there's a difference in terms of culture and religion and other things. You have to pave the way for the enculturation or the accumulation of this through the process of organic way, no? Processing. So yun din ang sinasabi actually ng mga Taliban. I'm not saying that they are good, no? What they're saying is we will accept these things, but give us the time and the leeway to put it in context with our culture and religion. Because they were fighting for Afghanistan precisely because that is jihadist. Yun ang kanilang hinahawakan eh. So yun ang masasabi ko dyan. But what I'm saying also is give them, let's see what they're gonna do. I think they are very intelligent as well, no? And they are at par with the 21st century context. Nag-evolve na rin yung mga yan. So let's wait and see how they're gonna manage the whole affair when you talk about women's rights.
Now let's go to the diplomatic angle. Of course, China immediately said they will respect the choice of the Afghan people, while America is still in confusion. Biden's survey rating has crashed with this crash of Kabul. Let's go to our experienced diplomat, Kaado. What do you think the future holds for the geopolitics of the world with this change in we have 1 minute to go, in regime in Kabul?
China and Russia will have a lot of positive role to play in the next months and years ahead for the Taliban. They know that they need some kind of foreign help for them to develop also. Nakita na nila yan. And some compromises will have to be made along the way. And I feel that this road forward for the Taliban will be easier than what was done before, when the Taliban were reacting only to the Western
Well,
culture.
that's all the time we have. I think we can also schedule again in our next sessions in-depth analysis as we get more information with from what the Taliban will be doing in the coming months. Thank you very much. For now, we take our break and we will discuss the COA confusion after this. Okay. And so while our technician, our volunteer technician, Kajos, is preparing, we are addressing our PowerThinks audience right now, and we are going to read some of their messages here. For example, si Ramon Amin, si Wolfowitz mismo ang nandito sa Pilipinas nung pinatalsik si Marcos. Yung mga operators nga talaga ng US State Department during that generation, no? Sila Wolfowitz, Richard Pearl, and so on, yan ang think tank po nila. And then let us see. Yes. Yes,
Wag mo kalimutan. Wag mo kalimutan yung resident agent nila rito. Si Mark Malloch Brown.
Yes, of course.
Yun ang resident MI6 CIA agent nila rito. And I am mentioning that kasi itong taong ito ngayon ang chairman ng Smartmatic. Anyway, back to Mentong.
Yes, yeah. No, I think we'll take this break. By the way, I'm going to remind our audience that we're taping also for a TV program. Ang tawag po doon sa TV program, Opinion Ngayon, yan ay available sa GSAT TV, satellite and cable po yan. And sa Golden Nation Network, which is free TV in Davao, several other provincial capitals, and they're preparing to go on free TV sa Metro Manila. So everybody will be able to watch that too. So you are also watching it because we are now taping it for the Power Things audience. Let me see also itong ibang mga messages or comments ng ating mga viewers, Power Things. Let me see from first Verdun Dizon, the Philippines, tumatalon, the Philippines has had jurisprudence even before the Convention on Refugees. Okay, well, we'll discuss the openness of the Duterte administration for accepting the Afghan refugees. Of course, I can comment on that since I was the head of our Philippine Refugee Processing Center during the time of CORI for the Indo-Chinese and Vietnamese refugees. And from Freddy Oredina, Afghanistan is in between Iran and China and a part of the old Silk Road. Okay, from Jolito Argeles, number 1 tuso ang Amerikano. Okay, tingnan po natin. Nawawala na naman ang cursor ko kasi tatlong monitors ko kaya nahihilo ako. Nawawala. Ayan, no, it's not. I'm not seeing my cursor. I can seeing my technician's cursor. So anyway, we will see. It's now 6:36. There are two videos that we prepared for you, for our audience, our Power Things audience, which will the GNN audience will not see. While I'm still trying to, yung nakita ko ng ang aking cursor. Let me read from the other, from the YouTube group natin. Sabi ni Indet Abehar, the U.S. forces sudden departure from Bagram Air Base is the signal the Taliban for the signal for the Taliban to attack. Actually, kaya po tumiklop ang Afghan army. I think this is an important point to discuss before we go into the second part of our GNN show. Ado and Maestra, is kung bakit nag-collapse ang Afghan army, which they spent $98 billion on, more or less different figures, but more or less malaki po ang dinastos po. 300,000 personnel sa Afghan armed forces laban daw sa 78,000 Afghan Taliban, guerrillas or terrorists they are called. Bakit nag-collapse? Palagay ko malinaw, malinaw po na nagkaroon ng usapan ng mga Taliban at yung mga kababayan po nila na tapos na po
Yes.
ito. Anunsyo si Biden na alis na ang Amerikano. Ano? Yeah, you were saying, Maestra Ana. You said yes, and sige, follow through mo.
Yes, actually, obviously, ganun talaga ang nangyari dyan. If you really read between the lines. Ang mga Talibans, come on, they are all the same in terms of nationality. Saan ba sila kakampi? Sa isang foreigner, an invader, or sa kapwa nila taga roon, no? So nagkaroon yan definitely ng usapan and negotiations behind closed doors or at the back. Kumbaga backdoor yan. Kumbaga may backdoor diplomacy ka sa state to state, may backdoor diplomacy din silang ginagawa. That's very obvious. Ang problema, Biden was too confident na ang loyalty ng karamihan ng Afghans na hindi part ng Taliban is with them. But actually, that's not right. That's not true. Kasi another thing that you have to factor in, yung government na backed up by the Americans are very corrupt or was very corrupt government. So, nakita mo sa isang news ng Russian news when I was trying to monitor the situation, that yung presidente nila were trying to escape with lots of money na nasa helicopter at nasa 3 convoy, punong-puno ng pera, may naiwan pa. Yun yung kanyang yung kanyang yung kanyang interesado sa pera, hindi nga niya inisip kung ano nangyari yung mga staff niya eh. So that's precisely nangyari. So ibig sabihin, yung mga tao sa Afghanistan, nakikita na nila na corrupt yung government, hindi ang ginagawa ng Amerikano is not necessarily building them up as a nation. So saan sila pupunta? Saan sila makikipag-negotiate at makikipag-deal? Of course, doon sa mga kabansa nila, ang Taliban is from Afghanistan or Afghans din yan eh. So yun yung nangyari. Nagkaroon ng mga compromises at ngayon, based doon sa aking napanood na press conference ng mga leaders ng Taliban, they're actually making negotiations and consultation with all possible group who would want to be part of what you call coalition government na itatayo sa Afghanistan. So that's happening.
Let me go now to Kado. There are several things that I can see here. By the way, magandang comment ni Daldit Pasamonte, very enlightening views on the Afghan situation. Tasio Delmar, sabi niya, the United States has committed to pay more than 2 trillion in health care, disability, burial, and other costs for roughly 4 million Afghanistan and Iraq veterans. Those costs will peak after 2048. So yung pinuhunan nila sa mga gera, talagang walang pakinabang ang mga mamamayan ng Estados Unidos. Ang problema, akala nila matalino itong mga Amerikano, akala nila kung gaano katalino sila, may free press daw sila, ang galing daw nila mag-control ng gobyerno nila sa pamamagitan ng eleksyon, mga tonto sila. 320 million tonto. You live there, Kaado, mga tonto. Kumita ang kanilang defense industry. Tatakot-takot. So, Kaado, you lived there for how many years? 20 years? What do you think of Americans now?
Well, let us distinguish between the American people and the American government, and between the American government and the deep state, no? These are the dynamics there. I have no problem with the American people. They're like any people anywhere in the world, no? Only the best for the next generations. Pero pagdating sa gobyerno, it's really all about power sa kanila between the Republicans and the Democrats. Sinisisi, pinagre-resign ni Trump, si Biden, samantalang si Trump ang pumirma na agreement with the Taliban na alis na ang mga Amerikano. Pero may mga yan, sila-sila, no? They don't even wash their linen in public properly.
Well,
Ngayon, pagdating sa deep state, yan? Non-negotiable yan. Pera yan. Kitaan yan. No? It does not even have anything to do with power. Kaya yung mga retirees ng Pentagon, ng Armed Forces ng Amerika, they end up to be consultants and service providers and suppliers for the armed forces of America. It's just a revolving door. And until they realize that they cannot clone the world into a liberal democracy, pabagsak ng pabagsak ang kanilang balor sa buong mundo. In fact, ang pinaka-problematic na nakita ko sa analysis ko ng mga response to the withdrawal ng Amerika sa Afghanistan is coming strongly from the British and the Germans. Pinakamalakas na talagang pinakamalakas na ha. So, ito lang foreign minister ng Germany, no, na we misjudged, no, the situation so much that Trump left Britain with no choice but to pull out too. Kasi nung pumirma ang Amerika, hindi naman sila kinonsulta eh. And that's why these people who are in NATO now are considering this as the worst NATO disaster. Yan ang problema. Kumakalog ngayon ng NATO and even the other European allies of the US are criticizing them constructively, ha? Constructively. Pero itong site, no? Itong site ng eroplano na nag-take off is a more long-lasting memories ang bibigay nito. Kaya doon sa Saigon na yung mga tao hindi lang nag-uunahan lang doon sa helicopter sa itaas ng building. This one will leave really gory memories about the American withdrawal in Afghanistan. Hindi nila maayos ang withdrawal. Tapos they want the world to believe that they were in Afghanistan for the right reasons. Excuse me.
Okay.
My goodness.
Well, yung nabanggit mo that it's indelible sa isipan ng mga tao. I have to say that actually ang memory po ng tao ay one generation, 25 years. Kung gusto mong i-brainwash ang bagong generation through the educational system, through media, mapapalimot mo ang anumang gusto mong ipalimot kung gagawin ng estado, ng may poder, in our case ng mga oligarchs, nagagawa po yan. That is why it's important for the elders to pass on their knowledge of the mistakes also, their own mistakes, di ba? Mamana, please comment on that before I move on to the...
Yeah, kaya nga sinasabi ko lagi.
Maestra Ana, sandali. Papasalamat tayo kay Musikerong Panday, nagpadala po ng Australian dollars, 15 Australian dollars, equivalent to almost 600 pesos, sabi niya, para kahit doom and gloom ang nangyayari sa buong mundo, let's be kind to one another para sa Lugaw initiative mo, Mentong. And ito po, I want to show you the Lugaw po na dinidisfit na po natin. Ito naman, champorado kit, no? Nagawa ng misis ko, is it, yan po,
yes,
yung combination, nandiyan na po. Sa alam ko, 15 pesos po, sapat for 3 to 4 people. So it's really a charitable project, And dito sa mga residente po sa community namin, ito ang ginagamit nila sa community pantry na po. Of course, iniisip ko, kailangan may panggatong pa with gas. But anyway, we cannot solve all the problems at the same time. Salamat, Musikerong Panday. And then si Anita Ruinar, 10 euro. More power po sa programa niyo, sabi niya. Si Imelda Sangalang, CA, Canadian dollars, $5 po. Maraming salamat po. We'll give you a report, all of you, dito sa lahat ng donation po ninyo. And if possible, we'll try to name the people or the families that get the benefits. Maraming salamat po. And let me see if there are comments that I should read. I think this is the right time to show our video. Or shall we? I think this is the right time to show our video. Kasi maintindihan ng mga nakakabata. kung ano yung World Trade Center attack noong 2001. That was 20 years ago. Maybe some of our viewers are 15 years old, 18 years old, 20 years old, even 30 years old. Sobrang, when you're only 10 years old at that time, baka hindi po nyo na-appreciate yung mga diskusyon tungkol dyan. In fact, ang mundo po naloloko pa tungkol sa World Trade Center attack na ito ay gawa-gawa ng terorista talaga. Samantalang ang totoo po, ito ay gawa ng oligarchs ng Amerika. What's his name again? Silverstein. Ano? Si Silverstein po, binili po yung World Trade Center complex kasi condemned ang mga buildings may asbestos. So alam po ninyo, when I go back to the history of these historical events, it will go on and on and on. Ang daming detalye to understand fully. You know? So ito ang greed again ng oligarchs, kasabot po ang political power which is Bush, ano? And may team behind it, planning it, yung gumawa ng PNAC, a project for a new American century, who said they needed a new Pearl Harbor. So gumawa sila ng Pearl Harbor, pinagkakitaan pa. Ano? Yung World Trade Towers condemned nga, nabanggit ko because of asbestos. So anong inisip nila? Bilhin ng ni Silverstein, isang Hudyo na financial oligarch. Ano? Siguro maraming kasosyo po yan ng mga oligarchs. Nag-put up sila ng, I think, $500 million. Hindi, basta $1 million lang. In-insure yung kanyang complex for, I think, 3 or more billions and all these details. One has to go back and review every detail. No? In-insure. And dinagdag pa sa insurance, terrorist attack na dati wala po sa insurance. So talagang planado, gumawa sila ng terrorist attack, ano? Kinlose down ng mga buildings for several weeks, floor by floor, kunwari repair down, naglagay na po ng mga thermate, ibang klaseng bomba na nagkakat, hinihiwa ang mga bakal, ang mga structural steel. And so, napakaraming pong detalye po niya. You know, and today, so how many percent of the world understand what really happened? But in America, about 50% are already thinking na yung 9/11 World Trade Tower attack was not what they are being told. Anyway, we have 2 videos here. One, I think unahin mo, Josh, yung video ni Kaado about Afghanistan, yung aeroplano, yung nahulog na dalawa na nakakapit sa aeroplano. Then yung video na aking 2-minute video na aking ipinahanda na gawa po ng architects and engineers for 9/11 truth. Mga arkitekto, mga enhinero, I think 4,000 o 5,000 na silang mga architects and engineers na Amerikano, mga Europeano, and so on na sinasabi, inside job yung World Trade Center attack and yung collapse ng building. Alam po ninyo, almost 100 story, 90 stories plus ata, almost 100 stories building, 10 seconds bumagsak. 10 seconds bumagsak on its own footprint. And that's why the architects and engineers and scientists are saying impossible yan kung walang bomba na tinanggal. Kung baka sa tao, tinanggal ang paa kaya bumagsak ang buong katawan. Bigla, with the speed of gravity. Okay, let's show this video. It's 6:55. Then we will do our taping for the second part of our Golden Nation Network show opinion na yun. So let's, are you ready with the video, Kajos? Okay, ready na ang mga video.
Akbar. So, kamusta na? Well, it's been a point of controversy now for more than a decade. A researcher now from the University of Alaska Fairbanks is weighing in.
My name is Leroy Halsey, that's my middle name, and I'm a structural engineering professor here at the University of Alaska Fairbanks.
He led a 4-year study which reevaluates whether Building 7's collapse could have been caused by fire.
Building 7 of the World Trade Center came down. It was never hit by an airplane.
It fell because thermal expansion caused a fire-induced progressive collapse.
And we'd never experienced, prior to that day, a steel frame building collapsing due to fire. It just didn't happen.
Was there a possibility it could lead up to failure through these fundamentals that NIST looked at and said they could, I looked at and said they couldn't?
The way they modeled it was somewhat pushing the limit, putting it mildly.
NIST said it was a fire problem, but yet I did not see any change to our codes.
I mean, I think the work that we're doing is ultimately going to make the difference. I have that confidence because I know the truth always comes out.
If there's a problem with the collapse of Building 7, there's a problem with 9/11.
Okay, balik na po tayo dito sa ating ano pa rin tayo, no? Power Things, no? Hindi pa tayo nagsisimula ng part 2 ng opinion ngayon, no? So, ayan po, yung nangingilabot ako nung pinapanood ko yung World Trade Center Tower collapse. Yung title po ng video na yung 7, dahil Building 7. Remember, there are 3 buildings doon sa incident yun. So, 2001, September 11. World Trade Tower 1, World Trade Tower 2, ang atensyon nandoon. Tinamaan kasi ng 2 eroplano, kaya sabi, natunaw ang mga bakal. Sinasabi ng mga engineers at architects na nandoon sa video, sinasabi, imposible, never it had it happened na nagko-collapse despite the steel structure ang kalansay or skeleton ng building. That doesn't happen. It's designed for very high temperatures ang mga structural steel. At ang sabi ng isang engineer doon kanina, kung yun nga ang dahilan, structural steel, bakit hindi nila binago ang building code up to now? That was 2001. Wala naman silang ginalaw sa building code na baguhin na sabihin, kailangan ayusin na yan kasi mayroong nangyari na sa 9/11. Wala po. So halatang-halata niloloko ang buong mundo at ang bayang Amerikano. And nagpapaloko naman ang maraming bayang Amerikano. Kasi may election daw sila.
Ang ano kasi dyan, sa building kasi, when you talk about yung building po, kasi my dad is an engineer, civil engineer. I grew up with him and grew up always with him sa lahat ng kino-construct na project ng dad ko. And there's a lot of experience. So my dad is not anymore with us, no? Ang building kasi kapag gumuho, kapag pababa, ibig sabihin parang ang foundation ng building ang tinira mo. Kasi kung titignan mo, pababa ang guho niya eh. Guguho siya pababa. So, ibig sabihin, ang problema, gumiwang or naging loosen yung foundation. So, from the foundation, lahat yun mula dun sa buhos. Kasi ang building may buhos yan sa lupa eh, para tumigas. Ang problema, ganun yung pababa niya, yung buhos niya, yung bagsak niya. Kapag ang building tinira ng isang helicopter or ng isang plane, yung part na tinira, yun yung must be destroyed. Hindi yung buong building pababa, guho. And you can even see that logically. Kasi in any construction, ganun talaga. I grew up with my dad. And my dad really constructed a lot. So kung titignan nyo talaga, magkaiba yung effect ng binundol ng plane or ng whatever, kahit nga missile ang ibundol mo dyan, ang maano lang dyan, masisira, yung tinamaan ng missile. Pero yung buong structure, hindi siya babagsak. Unless ang tinira ng plano is yung foundation sa baba or sa gitna. Pwede pa. Pero kung titingnan nyo, sa taas tumira eh.
Talagang magaling po yung financial oligarch na Silverstein ang pangalan. Talagang controlled demolition. Yun yung ginagawa po sa mga building na gusto nang i-demolish. Babagsak lang doon sa sarili ng pundasyon niya. So yung mga ibang mga buildings, madudumihan lang, hindi mawawasak. Pero ang tinatago nila Building 7, kasi hindi tinamaan ng eroplano. Bakit bumagsak? Hindi naman nagkaroon ng sunog na malaki. Controlled demolition. Well, that is a lesson for mankind. Ako, tuwan-tuwa na merong mga architect, engineero tulad niyang grupong yan na pero yung control ng impormasyon, media ay napakahalaga. Kaya nga po tayo, itong past 20 years, nagtsatsaga din tayo. Tinanggal tayo sa mga guesting sa ABS-CBN, GMA7 sa lahat. Punta tayo sa Golden Nation Network, RP1 ngayon, dito sa online. Magwawagi naman talaga tayo because truth always out, sabi nila. Truth always out.
Naalala ko kami itong yung kinuwento mo together with the video na yung reporter nagre-report na isa sa mga building na bumagsak ay itong building 7. Pero doon sa video na nasa likod ng background yung nandun pa yung building 7. Ina-announce na niya na bumagsak. Natatandaan mo yung kami ito?
Yes.
Grabe.
In fact, inaabangan ko nga ang September 11 so we can really spend 1 hour discussing it. Because itong 9/11 incident, ang daming napapaliwanag sa tao kung paano lokohin ang buong mundo. 7 billion people kayang lokohin dahil kontrolado nila ang media. Kung gaano ang greed, kasakiman ng tao na may poder na pinansyal tulad ng Steinberg at yung kanyang hawak ng mga politikong Bush, Cheney, and so on. At kung napakawalang puso nito mga to, kapwa Amerikano nila, pinatay nila mga 4,000 doon sa building, and so on and so forth. It's such an instructive historical incident. And ngayon, nabubuhay po sa ating diskusyon dahil nga yung full circle nangyari na po doon sa sinungalingan nila tungkol doon. Yung Taliban nanalo, hindi Amerikano always make the distinction. Yung tao nabobobohan o nabobobo ng sistema pero hindi sila ang may kasalanan. Yung Estados Unidos, yung Estado, yun ang may kasalanan. Yung mga may control ng Estado. But we have to move on. There are other subject matters we wanted to discuss, so we will now prepare to go into the second topic of our Global News Network, Global Golden Nation Network program opinion ngayon. Okay, magka-countdown po si Kajos to start our taping for this segment. Okay, Kajos, tell me when it starts. Okay, simula po tayo dito sa ating second segment at ang ating pamagat dito ay COA Confusion. Ito pong nangyari itong mga nakarang araw na report ng Commission on Audit ng Pilipinas na ang interpretasyon po ng media at ng opposition ay sinasabi ng Commission on Audit na may corruption sa Department of Health tungkol sa mga 65 or 68 billion peso worth. At nag-react naman ang Department of Health, nag-react din si Presidente Duterte na inis dahil sinabi niya, and let's look at the images that we prepared for this. Sabi ni Presidente Duterte, ask COA to stop flagging government agencies. Duterte says he won't tolerate corruption. Anong ibig sabihin ng flagging? Ana, you know flagging better than me, how to define it. Anong flagging? Yung tatawag ka ng atensyon dito sa isang ito. Kasi pumupuntang COA sa media at inaanunsyo yan. Pero just there, no? Anyway, basahin ko lang yung text nito. President Rodrigo Roa Duterte on Monday asked the Commission to stop flagging government agencies and publishing reports while documents are still being processed. Nasa proseso pa. Arguing that they create a perception of corruption and unfairly putting people in a bad light. And ito naman ang reaksyon ng Department of Health officials. They defended the use of the funds, but the Solons, the congressmen, the senators, meaning kinastigo si Duterte, yung atake daw ni Duterte sa COA. Actually, sinabi lang ni Duterte na huwag mag-flag, huwag mag-publicize bago matapos ang proseso. Hindi naman yung atake ng Presidente sa Commission on Audit. Anyway, sa Department of Health, sabi ni Duque, since this COA report came out, I and my fellow officials at the DOH could not sleep. We were bludgeoned with this issue. There are so many accusations. This is really unfair, unjust, that this judgment has been handed down clearly without giving the DOH the full 60 days yung pagkahanda ng sagot nila. Sa totoo lang po, nag-clarify na ang COA. And we reported this earlier. I think in our last Power Things and in our other shows, we clarified it. Sa ating RP1 show, we clarified it. And we produced this CNN report na, CNN Philippines. Ang headline po ay COA, no mention of corruption in Department of Health report. Sinasabi ng COA mismo. And pinaliwanag ng COA, as an example, some of the findings of the deficiencies involving COVID-19 funds amounting to 67.3 billion pesos resulted from non-submission of documentation or supporting papers, which the DOH may still submit in compliance with the auditor's recommendation. So, naamin naman ng COA, hindi naman corruption ang sinasabi nila, pero pag umabot yan sa media, corruption ang laging conclusion nila sa lahat ng mga questions. And hindi naman nag-comment ngayon ng COA, declines to comment on Duterte's tirad. Yung tirad daw ni Duterte, says reports are for transparency. Totoo naman po, we have freedom of information and so on. So, hindi din problema ng COA yan. Problema po ng media, yung mga nagbabayad ng media para maglabas ng mga negatibo o twist para negatibo, para skandaloso, may skandalo. And yung mga oposisyon, makikita po natin sa next image po natin. Parang, bakit next issue, mayroon akong nami-miss na isang image dito. Let me try to look for it in my, ayan, hanapin ko po para ma-project natin. Let me see, baka hindi ko nga nasama, pero well, meron ako pong isang image. Maaaring sometimes nawawala doon sa proseso ng pag-record ko. Yung tinabi ko po, yung mga dakdak po ng mga oposisyon at mga kandidato sa presidente lamang sa sino mang ikakandidato ng administrasyon. Naalala ko po sa ginawa ko, Sila Trillanes, Dakdak na, Lacson, Orisa
Robredo.
Robredo, lahat. Putaktina dito sa Department of Health and so on, gamit itong COA report daw. So, politicized po. And let us now be rational thinking people po. Let me see, baka mahanap pa po natin dito sa mga ito at may project po. Yan ba? Before that pa sana, but hindi na natin makita. It will take too much time for me to look for it. Wala. Anyway, so palampasin na natin yun. So yan po ang istorya nung nawawala na naman ang aking cursor. Okay. Anyway, we're on Global Golden Nation Network segment 2 also. Still, Okay, and so anyway, naging politicized po ito, naging partisan, pero actually, si Presidente na-frustrate dahil nga wala pa namang kaso talaga. So let us go to your comments, Kaado and Maestra. Maestra,
Okay.
ladies first, as usual.
Oh, okay. First thing is first, just to clarify, the COA report, ang hinihingi nila is documentation. That's very, very normal for any accounting firm. Ang nangyari kasi dyan, nandun niya reflect yung budget at saka yung pera, pero kulang yung documentation. But take note, they have 60 days to comply. Hindi pa nga nag-iisang araw na lumabas yung COA report, pinuputakti na ng mga yellow at dilawan yung issue, trying to paint na mayroong corruption dun sa sinasabing pera. My goodness, it just shows how trapo these people are. You're capitalizing on an issue na wala naman issue pa, kasi hindi pa nga tapos yung operations at saka yung ginagawa ng DOH, and still DOH has 60 days, pero they're already capitalizing ang politically grandstanding on this dahil malapit na eleksyon. Yun ang problema Kaya tandaan niyo mga kababayan, wag po natin hayaan na makabalik ang mga trapo sa 2022. At isa pa, yung natin, mga senador, kongresista, kaya dapat high time na talaga na we push for chacha and we change the structure of this government. Na andyan yun, ilan kongresista, ang dami nila, ang laki ng perang binabayad natin sa mga yan, taxpayers lahat yan. Saka yung Senado, na wala namang ginagawa, kundi bilugin yung ulo ng Pilipino para lang sumikat sila na as if they are what? Crusaders of what? Anti-corruption? Sinabi na pa. Sus, my goodness. Sila, hindi corrupt? Come on, goodness. Ay, nakakainis kasi they're trying to make us bobo that we're not. I know that because I know how it is. Kasi ako, kung nag-handle ako ng projects, they give me the money for the operation of the project, but they don't audit me. Na ginagawa ko po yung project. I have the time to do my financial report, all the documentation, all the explanation. Then after that, you submit to the auditor, the treasurer. The treasurer will audit na kung may kulang doon, they will ask you, ano yung kulang? Bakit ito nawawala? Until you can reply, you don't pa lang. No, kung hindi mo masagot, yun na corruption. Pero ang problema, kung masagot, walang corruption. Ganun yan Bobo lang hindi makaintindi dyan. My God.
Okay, Kaado, anong reaction mo dito?
Well, ang pinakasimple reaction ko dyan ay dapat malaman ng mga sambayanan na may deadline ang pagsasubmit ng mga annual reports. Ngayon, halimbawa, ang deadline pagpalagay na natin sa buwan na ito. Hindi naman lahat ng mga 4 months, 3 months, 2 months, and 1 month before, may hahabol ang papeles. Pero usually, and then meron talaga mga masalimuot na mga transaksyon na nadidelay ang submission ng mga supporting papers. Dapat sinabing may deficiency, hindi nangangahulugan, nawawala yung pera. Kundi wala pa yung papeles subject to liquidation. And meron namang procedure dyan, Meron naman procedure dyan. Sabi nga ni Michael Aguinaldo, may due process naman yan where yung mga dapat naghabol na papeles ay may hahabol. Yan. Ngayon, Bakit may flagging na sinasabi? Ewan ko. Siguro dahil si Michael Aguinaldo ay appointed ni Noynoy Aquino. Ay, bakit yan? Imbestigahan si Michael Aguinaldo. Kalida, Pepe, ha? At baka ito may baka ang jockey nito ay yellow. Ha? Baka ito ay isang dilawan. Matagal na problema ito ni Aguinaldo mula nung umupo si Aguinaldo dyan at mula nung pumasok si Duterte. Laging mayroong yellow flagging. COA is not a prosecutory body. It's an accountancy firm of the government. Kaya ang prosecution dapat isubmit pa ng COA either diretso sa ombudsman or sa Department of Justice. Either the ombudsman or the Department of Justice will file the necessary prosecution. Kaya kayo mga taga-COA, tumahimik na lang kayo dyan. I-committee ninyo sa tamang mga tao, sa tamang mga opisina kung mayroon kayong gustong habulin para hindi naman kayo magmukhang katawa-tawa.
Kaya nahanap na po ng ating technician yung aking image na hinanda to show that there are responsible solons or congressmen and politicians like si Representative Marcoleta, and I think pwede naman i-project na ng ating technician sa screen natin. No? Yung sa RP1 na report, Representative Marcoleta, inilabas na 2020 AAR ng COA, meaning AAR meaning I had it prepared na yon, annual audit report. Inilabas na 2020 AAR, annual audit report ng COA, premature. So meron ding error ang COA. Sobrang maaga. Kasi nga hindi pa conclusion yan, kundi lang. Anyway, I think dito sa image, kung kita na ng audience po natin, sino mga pumutak, pumutakti? Si Trillanes, si Lacson, Escudero, ay naghahanda na
Oh my God.
Kaya nasa Inquirer. Magkaya kaya ang binayad nila o anong PR na ginawa nila ni Escudero na maibalik na ang pangalan niya sa opposition newspaper. Iboboto pa ba natin yan? Kung ako, maghahanap na ako ng bago. Si Gordon, sumali din, yung kaibigan mo.
Yes.
Hontiveros, Gordon Hontiveros, according to this report by Hannah Borde ng GM News, Tel Duque, Gordon Hontiveros, Tel Duque, COA did not destroy DOH. Wala naman sinabi siguro si Duque ng si winasak. Pero yung reputasyon, yung maaring na ang pakiramdam ng DOH nawawasak, kaya nga hindi sila makatulog, sabi ng mga taga-DOH. Kanina Ana, you were telling me that you watched the hearing with the DOH. Naawa ka doon sa mga tauhan ng DOH. Please tell us about it.
Hindi, una, ipupunto ko lang kung bakit na-frustrated si Digong. Kasi one thing also that dapat ninyong maintindihan, kung bakit na-frustrate yung Pangulo, kasi hindi lang actually yung DOH ang ginaganyan. Almost other agency like DSWD, pinaflag din. Si Vaccine Czar, Carlito Galvez. May nagkano din sila. Ang iba-ibang agency na parang sinasabi nga niya, hindi pa tapos ang operation. Marami pang ginagawa ang busy ng mga tao. Pwede ba? Kung mayroon kayong huwag niyong ilagay sa media. I-submit niyo doon sa tsaka i-explain na lang mabuti kasi it paints a negative image of government. Pero isa lang naman ang tirada nila. They just want to destroy the Duterte administration, Duterte himself. That's how it is politically. Yun ang sinasabi ko. Nakakaawa ang DOH kasi one thing that people has to remember, ang isang departamento ay hindi lang isang tao yan. Duque is just one, okay? There's a big bureaucracy in a bigger bureaucracy. Department of bureaucracy in a much larger bureaucracy. Sa bureaucracy, ang dami-daming pasikot-sikot, ang daming mga batas, mga policy, mga rules and regulation na pinusunod yung mga yan. Para kahit konting audit, ang bagal niyan. Kasi bakit? Maano rin yan maniti-gritty. So hindi ka pwedeng magsabi na, okay, may ganyan, Duque, corrupt ka na. That's very, fallacious, no? I'm not defending Duque or anything, no? I'm just saying that people has to have the mind and the intelligence at least to decipher na this is a demolition job and this is politically motivated against the current president ng mga kakandidato sa 2022 kasi wala na silang mahanap na imabato. Lahat, yung South China Sea issue, guhong-guho na. So saan pa sila babato? Wala na. So ito na yun. Gumawa sila ng issue.
Okay. Lumalagablab si Maestra Ana. So let's go
to... Dapat kung merong makaintindi sa sitwasyon ni Duque, ni Galvez at ng DSWD, ay ang aking best friend na si Dick Gordon. Natatandaan mo ba kami itong nung email pa ang social media, wala pa itong mga Facebook. Merong bumakbak sa akin sa email, if you remember, ang haba nung aming debate. At ang pinipresent niya na corrupt si Gordon ay yung taon-taon na unliquidated papers ni Gordon sa COA. But, nung sinek namin lahat, ang compliance ni Gordon, lalo na sa SBMA, na pinaparatanan siya nitong gagong taong ito, na corrupt, and fully liquidated lahat. Kaya, kunti naman, mag-commiserate ka naman dito sa mga nagiging biktima na katulad mo ng COA. At saka ng mga taong hindi naiintindihan kung paano mag-function ang Republic of the Philippines. Okay?
Correct.
Sige, Maestra Ana.
Si Gordon, alam niya yan. Kahit nga dyan sa kanyang Red Cross, the same process yan. Alam niya yan. May purchasing sila. Diliquidate mo, supporting documents. Hindi mo madaling magagawa yan. Pero I really am disappointed with Senator Gordon. I was expecting him to be a bit more, gamitin niya ang pagiging intelligent niya. Kasi once before, I really admired him.
Statesman dapat.
Oo, diba? I admire
Dapat
him. Pero ngayon, he's just one of those, the likes of Trillanes, na kahul ng kahul na parang aso. Diba? Come on, Senator Gordon. Come on, Senator Gordon. Rise up because you're better than that. And that's what I admired him before. Right now, I'm changing my mind about him. Just because of the 22 election? Come on. Be better than that, I think. That's the challenge, I think. No?
Well, kaya nga po ako'y parang lagi ko namang sinasabi at inaamin ko, I do not like elections. I like what they do in China, meritocracy, may election sa baba lang kasi yung pipiliin doon, magkakilala. And all the way up, alam mo, batay sa nagagawa at nagawa na at gagawin pa. There are ways of internally correcting corruption basta mayroon kang matibay na moral leadership. And I think President Duterte has been trying to show that and exercise that. But the system works against that kind of meritocracy. Yung atin kailangan pumapil sa media, magbayad sa media, at magpabayad sa oligarchs para may perang pambayad sa media, para makilala ng tao at maalala ng tao. Kahit na anong gawin mong kabutihan, wala ka sa media, parang you don't exist. Yan ang problema sa ating sistema. And ngayon, nakikita natin sa exact operation nitong nangyayari, na media din, dinabaluktot yan, and so on. And enjoy naman ang mga politikong may balak tumakbo, may balak manalo sa eleksyon, and so on. So yan ang problema po sa sistema natin. But anyway, President Duterte, unlike in the past, sinasabi niya talaga yung kanyang iniisip, and it's up to us, yung mga matitino na walang self-interest dito sa ating publiko, na ipaliwanag yan na, maging makatotohanan tayo. Hindi po yan ang sinabi na pinapalabas ng media, kundi ito, ganyan. So, we're doing our job, Anyway, we have 5 minutes and ample time to expand on this, Kaana, what would you like to see happen after this na ngayon? Maybe I should say also, is the government media doing enough to
Oh,
explain
come
this?
on.
Yeah,
The
sige, please.
government media is what you're referring is government state media like
Yeah,
RT1 and all that. Yun yung sinasabi ko din. I mean, I don't have anything against our state media, pero I'm telling you, they're not as strong as the private media like, my God, Rappler, CNN, ABS-CBN nga na wala na sa ere, maano pa rin, machika pa rin, diba? Pero what I'm saying is they have to strengthen the state media that it can really explain. Yung explain, hindi yung dahil lang sa labas-labas ka na kung ano-ano. Explain in a sense na education, na makikita kung ano yung totoo. At saka maging strong din sila na palakasin nila yung puwersa at saka coverage, no? One of that, how to do that, is actually to modernize as well. Upgrade. Yung upgrade mo yung infrastructure ng state media. Make it modern. Make it state of art. Kasi ang tao ngayon, kapag nanonood sa media, kapag state of art maganda, ang reception and all, they are attracted to it and make it a little bit more lively. Gawan ng paraan yan. No? Kasi like, parang ako nanonood ng PT before, I'm telling you, kung hindi lang ako nag-iisip, hindi ako manonood. Bakit? Sometimes kasi hindi maganda yung reception ba, yung visual. Kailangan mo yung visual kasi everyone right now is visually oriented na. Hindi na nga nagbabasa yung mga bata ng kahit na newspaper eh. Ako, old generation ang dating ko kasi kahit na bata pa ako, old ang pag-iisip ko. So I read newspaper pa rin. I am very text-oriented, books and all. Pero my God, my other contemporaries, they want visual. Everything is visual.
Hindi naman old ang kaisipan mo, kundi advanced. Tulad na advanced. Talagang media man sa atin, no? PR man, information man, press attaché nga sa ating Washington embassy in the 80s, no, to the 90s. And so, Kaado, let me just, before Kaado comes in, I just want to say this one weakness of our state media. Sila ay nagmamakaawa taon-taon sa budget nila sa Senado at Kongreso. So, nagiging alipin sila po nung mga whimsical, self-interested politiko sa Kongreso at sa Senado. So, that is a weakness within the system. Dapat magkaroon sila ng annual budget that is free from political interference from the legislature ng mga ambisyosong mga politiko. I think that is fundamental. I don't know, Kaado, if this can be pushed.
Well, 30 years ng reaksyon ng Cory to Noynoy is reactionary to the use of Marcos by the media. Remember, yung mga NMPC doon at saka I think there was no abuse on the part of the president during that time because active naman lalo na sa turismo at saka sa trade promotions. But ang ano kasi, ang reflexes kasi dito mga liberal democrats, no? At saka itong mga wannabes, itong mga gustong maging, ano bang mga gustong maging ninyo pagka kayo humawak ng poder, no? Ayaw nilang bigyan ng laya ang government media because the assumption is government media will abuse itself. Kaya nga hindi ba naging suggestion natin, Mentong, na itong PTB4 at saka itong RP, Radio Pilipinas, no? RP1, RP2, FM1, FM2, ay gawin ng parang British Broadcasting System.
Yes.
Na merong suporta fixed na nanggagaling sa gobyerno every year but are free to also get advertising from sa labas, no? Unlike now kasi public media, government media is prohibited from ganyan ka hindi maka-flex.
We now have 25 seconds left. No? So, summa total, let's just say we have helped clarify that the COA confusion is caused by an early announcement. Marcoleta is correct. And then, of course, the twisting by media and by the opposition and ambitious politicians preparing for the next election. With that, we have to end this discussion. Maraming salamat for joining us here on Golden Nation Network, Opinion Ngayon. Okay, our technician will now switch back to just power things, and let's get back to our issues, no? Afghan refugees welcome in the Philippines, sabi ng Palasyo.
Yes.
Well, I have ambiguous reaction to this. Baka alam po ninyo pwedeng, and I'm speaking as, by the way, nagpapasalamat po tayo kay Fernando Dizon for 200 pesos sa GCash po sa atin. Again, we will make a report. We will have to have an accountant to help us keep record of these things. And then let me see, ano pa ba?
Nako, baka ma-audit ka.
Oo nga, ma-audit ka. Dapat naman talaga i-audit tayo. Yun lang, how do we do this? We cannot afford an auditor. Wala naman tayong all of this will go to actual help to people. No? Well, anyway, we'll find a way to report. Okay, let's just go back to the Afghan refugees. Welcome in the Philippines. Okay, kailangan maingat tayo, no? Dahil unlike po dito sa Vietnamese refugees, no? Wala pong global plans ang mga Vietnamese, North Vietnamese at that time, or the South Vietcong, the South Vietnamese na anti-US forces, no? Ang Taliban, baka may elemento ng Al-Qaeda, and all these other groups na may global plans, and baka masama po ang mga terorista sa kanilang mga padadala dito na hindi natin malalaman. Of course, we can always prepare screening and so on, no? But there's that danger. Yun lang paalala ko. But of course, it would be good for the Philippines to show its best Christian face dito sa mga crisis na to. And I think naman the world is going into a stage of better harmony. Mapipilitan kasi ang Estados Unidos na umatras, tulad ng Saudi Arabia, umatras na sa pagpupondo ng mga jihadi groups kasi nga wala na silang pera, oil is not as important as before, and so on and so forth. So your reaction sa Kaado, let's start with Kaado this time, age before beauty. Age muna si Kaado.
Papasko muna kay Kaana.
Ayaw ng age, Okay, ayaw mami ng age.
Beauty before age.
Well, I don't have to comment because our next item is also very interesting. No? Meralco rates going out for the fish this August. And may nagpadala ulit, paalala sa atin that in 2001 pa. Nagpresenta tayo ng mga artikulo, mga argumento laban sa Electric Power Industry Reform Act. I think it was still early in 2001. Baka Marso, Abril pa po ito, hindi pa pasado ang EPIRA. Si Soto po ang kausap po natin. We had si Dang Saida, nandiyan po, si Christopher Cruz, and some of the other names I don't remember, but I would like to list them down again. So we made our effort to stop the EPIRA, which is the reason why our power rates are going up now. So we have two items to comment on. Maestra.
Ako, ang una kong komentahan is yung refugees. Kasi I've worked with refugees, and in refugee camps when I was actually outside of the country, and it was 10 years of my experience outside. Solid, hindi ako umuwi ng bansa. Tawag nito, ang hirap kasi, ito yung pinakamahirap na part ng nangyari sa Afghanistan, which is the same with the rest of countries. Even in Myanmar right now, there's a lot of refugee because of what's going on in there. Ang refugee kasi, dalawa yan. May political asylum seeker ka, which is the political persecuted, and refugee really, the civilian population na displaced, or they want to, feeling nila they have to get outside the country kasi nga, baka kung ano mangyari. So yan yung dalawa. Dito sa Pilipinas, hindi ganun kadali. I understand yung friendship at saka very open arms na attitude ng Pinoy na mapagkalinga. Pero one thing that you have to remember, when you talk about influx of refugee, it also have negative impact sa isang country. It will affect your population kasi syempre, at then it's costly because the host country has to provide for everything. At kapag hindi mo na ibigay yan ng matino, then you will be criticized internationally. I've experienced that because I've worked with on the ground. So it's a very delicate issue that I think our government has to be very careful. And I think if in any case magkakaroon tayo ng ganon, parang refugee policy na papuntahin dito yung mga Afghans, it has to be done and planned out carefully and really efficiently. Kasi hindi maganda. The reason also why, like for example, if you look at border areas like Myanmar and Thailand, no, maraming refugee from Myanmar, no, mga Burmese. Nagkakaroon ng impact yan sa ekonomiya ng Thailand, sa peace and order ng Thailand, ang dami-dami. But at the same time, you have also to look at the fact na itong mga refugee, they don't have a state, they don't have a home, and they're displaced. So dalawa yan na ibabalansi mo. So hindi ko ganun kadali ang usapin na yan. But I think secretary or the spokesperson knows that. Na, kasi he is a very good international lawyer and he knows these things. But I think he was speaking in the spirit that Filipinos are very good people, welcoming people, and we are ready to help. But I think the issue of refugee is a very delicate issue that we really need to think about.
Okay, before we go to Kaado, let me just read some interesting comments dito. Pinay Paparazzi, I lived in UK po before nagbabayad po ng TV license ang mga tao kung may TV set sa house. Dito po kinukuha yung funds ng BBC 1, 2, 3, and 4. Ayun, that's a good insight. So sabi ni Freddy Villanueva, mas gusto ko manood ng PTV4 kaysa mga private mainstream media. Government media mas paniwala na ngayon. From Pablo Havellana, ang problema nagagamit ang COA audit ng mga politiko. Let's see sa other side, and well, si Juliet Camaro has joined. Mabuhay, sabi ni Juliet. And okay, let me see. Well, we'll just come back to this pag ma-review po natin yung iba. So, Kaado, any comment on the power or if we can also move on,
Well, dito sa refugee, tama ka, Mentong eh. Kailangan na pag-aralan ito kasi unang-una, hindi ito mga Asyano, mga taong ito. Pangalawa, hindi naman sa ako'y racist or something. No? Pero komplikado ito dahil iba ang pagka-Muslim ng mga ito kaysa sa mga Muslim nating mga kapatid. So, ako'y natutuwa na malaki ang ating puso sa mga bagay na ganito, pero let us proceed with caution. Ito naman sa kuryente, matagal ng problema ito eh. In fact, nagtataka nga ako, itong mga oposisyon, tira ng tira sa West Philippine Sea, tira ng tira sa COVID-19, yung Special Amelioration Fund, tira ng tira sa korupsyon. Wala naman kayo sinasabi tungkol sa kuryente. Saan ang tao, 5 beses na nag-increase. My goodness naman. Alam naman natin. Alam ninyo, nadadivert ang isip ninyo eh. Pag-usapan natin ng kuryente para may oras pa eh. May oras pa para isama ito ni Presidente Duterte sa reforma niya, sa tunay na pagbabago. Ang problema, may mga tao nakapaligid kay Duterte na sinasala ang informasyon parang cordon sanitaire when it comes to kuryente. Ha? At sino ang numero 1 dyan? Ay yung kanyang PDP laban president ngayon, si Alfonso Cusi. Dinuduyan-duyan kayo dyan. At may pahabol pala ako. May pahabol pala ako dito kay Aguinaldo. Ito pala naging membro ng law office ni Benjaldia at saka ni Berlio. So, alam niyo, si Miguel Dia, medyo okay ako dyan, pero baka ito si Bello kumakambyo, ha? Wala akong tiwala sa tao yan. Dinimanda ko nga ng 10 kaso yan, eh. But, balikan natin itong issue ng Afghanistan, no? Siguro naman kahit papano yung leksyon ng kalayaan, ng democracy na liberal. Yung, kasi anathema yan sa Taliban, yung liberal democracy. Sa edukasyon ng mga kabataan, lalo na. At saka sa mga karapatan ng mga kababayan. The Taliban also have a lesson to learn dyan. And if they want the help of the outside community, primarily Russia and China, medyo magdadahan-dahan sila pagdating dyan. Kasi ang China nag-announce na they are willing to extend, di ba? Kasi part naman niya ng it is somewhat part of the Eurasia, di ba? So kung gusto natin, nangako naman ng mga Taliban na antabayanan nila yung mga terorista at yung report ng mga nakapasok din yung mga terorista doon sa Kabul was brought to the attention of the Taliban and they said they will do something about it. Lalo na yung anak ng founder, no? Na nakalimutan ko ang pangalan, pero yung anak ng founder. So, ayusin din ninyo. The Taliban also has a room for improvement. And ako'y naniniwala na kung talagang pag-ibayuhin nila ang konsepto at pananampalataya sa Allah, sa relihiyong Islam, magdadalawang isip sila sa pagka-radical nilang mga Muslim, sa pagka-fundamentalist nilang pagka-Muslim na tinulak lamang nitong mga ibang terorista. So para maka-join na rin sila sa Community of Nations at masali na sa development, lalo na nung area na yan, Afghanistan, yung mga katabi nila dyan, lalo na they're almost bordering Russia and almost bordering China. Marami silang makukuha concessions dyan. Pero mag-mainstream naman sila ng kaunti.
I think dadaan naman dyan ng Belt and Road Initiative ng China. So, I think they will look forward to development. Okay, and by the way, kung hindi sana inistorbo din ng Russia 40 years ago, no? Mga 19 no? Baka by its own dynamics, ang Afghan civilization naman and culture magde-develop to modernize din, di ba? So, talagang dapat na, sige, maestra.
Yung 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago na, kasi ngayong week, no? The Afghans sent a delegation to China. And they actually asked China if they can be part of the Belt and Road Initiative. So yun. Nag-send ang delegation. They have, ang pumarap sa kanila is si Foreign Affairs Minister Wang Yi. So they had a conversation. They're saying na we want to develop our country. We need the financing. Can we be part of the, how do you call that, of the Belt and Road Initiative? Sabi naman ng China, is possible. We can have talks. We can explore the possibility. But only one thing, you don't do away with terrorism. Kasi it also affects Xinjiang in sa place na yan. So they have really, they're going talks. And I think the same with Russia. So that this is already a positive development. Baby step, I think. We cannot rush things. Everything starts with a baby step. So tingnan natin kung anong mangyayari before tayo maging judgmental.
Okay, let's move on. We'll try to finish by 8 o'clock kasi yung ano bang tawag dito, yung extra 15 minutes siguro we'll try to avoid that now. The next 4 items are about the virus, Sinovac, vaccines, and in general, 4 items. Pagsasama ko na, ito ay post ni Austin Ong. Sabi niya, isang malinaw na benepisyo sa independent foreign policy ni Presidente Duterte, yung vaccines na nakukuha natin, saving millions of Filipinos. While many countries are facing problems getting supplies due to some rich Western countries hoarding, the Philippines is getting supplies from China, Russia, Japan, and the Western countries. Ito po ang breakdown ng Agosto lang po, no, ng mga vaccines na darating. 2 million Sinovac, August 20, August 20, 500,000 AstraZeneca, August 21, 2 million Sinovac, August 21, 1 million Sinopharm. Pumapasok na po ang Sinopharm. And ang pangatlong linggo po, 400,000 to 500,000 Moderna. Okay, and next. Ang National Institute of Health Director says new Israeli COVID data is building case for booster shots in the US. In other words, yung Israel kasi maliit ang populasyon at I think 70, 80% or even 90% vaccinated na, magandang laboratorium para maobserbahan ang Pfizer at Moderna vaccines. Yun lang kasi ang ginamit po nila. And sa totoo lang po, humihina din down to 36, 42, ganyang percentage ang effectivity o effectiveness ng Pfizer at Moderna. Kaya wala pong katotohanan yun na Sinovac lang po, nangangailangan ng booster shot. Yun din ngayon ang lumalabas sa Israel at sa Estados Unidos gusto nilang ihanda na rin ang booster shot. Some say 6 months later, some say 8 months later sa second shot ng vaccine, yung pangatlong shot. So, let us learn from all this at huwag po tayong magpadala doon sa propagandang ginagawa po ng mga anti-China vaccines na maraming lumalabas. So, ang China naman po, nagde-develop pa rin. Ang Sinovac po mag-a-apply for clinical trial na ng Delta specific. Yung talagang tinatarget lang ang Delta variant. Sa third quarter of this year. Ngayon po, magsisimula na po. Third quarter, September, October, August, September, October, November, ano bang third quarter? July, August, September. Ngayon na, nag-apply na sila.
Ngayon na.
Ngayon na.
August, September, October.
And the last item dito sa related to the vaccines is U.S. Health Agency says traditional Chinese medicine can help COVID-19 patients recover faster. Ano po ito? Yan pong mga samples dyan sa likod po ay yung tinatawag na Lianhua Qingwen. Meron pa akong isang kahon. Siguro si Kaado, pinadalhan ko din dati. And siguro may isang bag ko po kasi ako nabigay po ng isang Chinese friend natin na nakatulong kay Mayor Jun Simon nung siya ay nagka-COVID. Yung paniwala niya, nagka-COVID siya. Nag-test siya na positive. So siguro nagka-COVID talaga kasi maraming mga, ngayon sinasabi nagka-COVID na din sila na hindi naman nagpa-test na. So these are the 4 new developments that we can discuss. So this time, let's start with the lady again, Maestra Ana.
Sa akin po, natutuwa lang ako kasi may Sinopharm na po tayo. 1 million na donation from China. So at least, kasi I think Sinopharm is really a good vaccine. So at least, ibig sabihin po, kung may 1 million donation na, probably we'll have more of Sinopharm ang dadagdag po sa ating, how do you call it? Sa ating portfolio po. Kasi alam niyo po, Mentong, hindi lang kasi dapat ang adults ang mabakunahan. Kung talagang gusto natin ma-achieve yung tinatawag ng community protection. Kailangan din po yung mga bata, lalo na po yung medyo teenager na lumalabas-labas din. Lalo na sa probinsya, kahit sabihin mo hindi dapat pwedeng lumabas yung bata, lumalabas eh. So I hope na at least itong mga, pag natapos na tayong lahat, mabakunahan din yung mga bata. Ang ano ko lang doon sa third dose, I think yung third dose wala naman ata, or booster, ba ang tawag doon? Booster, third dose. Wala naman sigurong problema doon. Pero yun nga lang po, before pa tayo mag-usap ng third dose, bakunahan po muna natin ang 70% to 80% of the adult population. Kasi yun yung pinaka-importante. And I think po, sabi sa report, kasi I was listening to the talk to the people ni President, nag-report po lahat ng kabinete doon, including the vaccine czar. Ang sinasabi na, I think po, mga maestro, by August, October po, September to October, baka ma-achieve na po ng major cities like Metro Manila, yung tinatawag mong community protection, hindi nga herd immunity, community protection po, na hopefully yun ang magiging magandang Christmas po natin. Hopefully.
Okay.
And I'm so happy that Sinovac is starting to have a trial on specifically Delta. Pero come on, may Lambda na po. May isa tayong Lambda dito, pero my God, may Lambda na. Ano pa ba yung susunod?
Well, ako, I'm confident sa ang tawag na inactivated virus vaccine. Kasi po, yung inactivated virus vaccine, buo ang virus na kanilang pinapatay at sinasaksak sa katawan para mag-react ang katawan at ma-recognize yung virus. Ang problema doon sa Pfizer at Moderna, mRNA, isang corona, ang tawag nila, isang spike. Ano? Kasi parang durian yan, maraming tusok-tusok yung virus, no? So isang tusok lang po, spike, ang kanilang sinasama doon sa vaccine. Hindi naman lahat pare-pareho yung spike na ma-recognize no? Well, of course, continuing pa rin ang studies dyan. Let's go to Kaado.
Masasabi ko lang ay, una, yung shortness of breath ko ay nawala na ako magpa-first box. Pangalawa, bumata ako.
Gumapo!
Pangatlo, humupa yung pamamaka ng aking paa. At pang-apat, nakakalakad na ako ng malayo ngayon na hindi ako hinihingal. Hindi ko alam kung ito ay Deus Ex Machina, divine intervention, pero nahiyang ako, no? At dahil nga sa pag-aaral ko ng mga iba't ibang klaseng bakuna, siyempre, trabaho natin yan bilang isang journalist, no? Tama si Mentong yung the most conservative way ng paggawa, no, ng bakuna, yun ang isinagawa ng China. And doon ako, pagdating sa maglalagay ka ng alien sa loob ng katawan mo, hindi ako magpapaturok sa anything that comes from the US or the West. Pakalagyan pa ako niya ng microchip na kung paano gagawin sa akin, mabakla pa ako. Yun nagbibiro ako ng kaunti, pero ngayon, nandyan, inaamin na, lingwa ba yan? Yan yung ating... hindi ko pa nainom yung sa akin dahil palagay ko hindi pa ako nagka-COVID. Pero nandito lang, baka may mga ilangan kami itong idadagdag natin doon sa isang box mo dyan kung kinakailangan. No? At tayo naman ay makakasource siguro niya kung tayo mga ilangan. Okay lang yan. Napakaganda ho na i-combine ang natural medicine where China is very advanced, no, sa medical practice as we know it to be medicine of the West.
Okay.
Yung combination na yan, no? By the way, Mentong, nakakatulong din ang acupuncture. No? Kasi yung mga bara-bara, mga ugat, ay napapaluwag niya. So, hindi pa tapos ang diskusyon dito. We are learning. As we are learning with the new variants. No? Nandito na yung Lambda. Ewan ko, ang alam ko lang naman nung ako'y college, lagi nag-aaway ang Beta Sigma at saka Sigma Rho dyan sa UP. So ngayon
may Lambda na.
Let us take this lightly. Magpabakuna na tayo. Ngayon, lahat tayo nagsisikikan dyan. Sabi nga ni Bongo, vaccine first before politics.
Diba?
Magalit si Tabong.
Pwede na palang mag-offer ng Sinovac vaccine ang mga beauty parlor.
Really? Hindi ko na-get mo na. Mga maestro.
Hiyang lang. Uy, hindi ko ini-endorse ka na. Baka meron magpabata dyan eh.
Depende sa effect.
Personal experience lamang po yan.
Okay.
Oy, pero mga maestro,
Maestra.
huwag niyo kalilimutan. Ang pinag-uusapan po natin is yung vaccine at magkaroon tayo ng protection para sa ating kababayan at magpabaksina po tayo. May isa pang issue na ating dinadala na kailangan din nating sabihin sa ating mga kababayan. Wag po niyong kalimutan, mag-sign po kayo sa aming petisyon na ginawa na pinangungunahan po ng ating mga maestro na nasa change.org. Ang ano niya is hashtag 4th District Petition. Kasi importante po ang issue na malaman kung saan yan nagsimula at magkaroon ng proper and scientific na investigation as to the origin ng COVID-19 pandemic.
I-request ko kay sa ating techie, si Josh, i-post yung ating change.org at saka yung number kung saan pwede mag-sign up. Kasi nasa 750 plus na po tayo, aabutin natin na 1,000. Pinipigilan tayo ng YouTube, hindi po pinapaplay na yung ating media forum para malathala po ito. And sa Facebook, hindi ko alam ang status ngayon, pero dito lang sa mga posts na ginagawa po ng ating mga kaibigan, nakikita. But here, si Joshua will post it so you can take a look again and I can announce it. So dito sa vaccines, I think we'll discuss this. Let's move on. We have now, it's now 7:54, 6 minutes before 8 o'clock. Yes?
Remind ko lang Mentong, kayo po ay pumunta sa sovereignph.com bukas. May karagdagang impormasyon po sa column ni Mentong Laurel ukol sa pinagsimulan at mga pagdududa tungkol dito sa mga biolaboratories ng Estados Unidos. So, continuing educational information, ang pinakabakuna natin sa ating utak para hindi tayo ma-colonize na naman ng mga hegemons at maging single parent na naman tayo katulad ng mga Afghanistan, single parent sila ngayon, iniwan sila ng kanilang kasosyo.
Okay.
Mga Amerikano.
We'll go on. It's now 7, target natin matapos ng 8 o'clock, no? Sa Estados Unidos, Biden's approval drops to lowest of 7-month presidency after Taliban takeover. Natural naman po dahil malaking kahiyan at kawalan ng kredibilidad itong nangyari sa Afghanistan, sa Kabul, para sa Estados Unidos. Mukhang magbabago ang politika ng mundo dahil dito sa insidenteng ito. And then last item po natin is the age of aircraft carriers is coming to an end. This is an opinion piece by Robert Parley from the National Interest. August 12 lang po ito. Just mga 6 days ago. And importante po itong dalawang item na to kasi nga we're talking about the next 5-10 years of America in the world. Yung balak po nila na Asia Pivot, yung balak nila mag-install ng mga missiles sa First Island Chain. Kasama po ang Pilipinas, yung sinatawag nilang First Island Chain. Sana maudlot lahat yan dahil nakikita na ng mundo yung totoo na ampaw na po ang Estados Unidos. And sa totoo lang po, maganda naman ang intensyon ng Russia and China doon sa kanilang multipolar world, yung advokasya ng China na community of shared future for mankind, komunidad ng sangkatauhan. So we have our last 3 minutes, Ado and Maestra Ana, and maybe we should spend a few minutes also reading some of our comments. Okay. Sabi dito ni Ator Biel, wala na bang naghihikahos dito sa ating bansa at kukupkop na naman tayo ng mga refugees na galing sa bansang binaboy ng iba? Okay. And then, sige, Kado, you were going to say.
Well, ang akin lang dito ay laos na po mga aircraft carriers. Dahil ang control ngayon ay wala na sa ibabaw ng dagat. Ang control po ngayon ng warfare ay nasa ilalim ng dagat through the submarines, no? And the missiles. And China has the most advanced type of missiles, which is hypersonic. Mach 4 po yan, 4 times the speed of sound. Kaya tinawag yung Dongfeng 27 at saka Dongfeng 5 na ship killers. Yan po ay launched from missiles at babagsak yan sa mga ships. Dalawa, in a speed that cannot be intercepted. That's why it's hypersonic. At yan po ay capable of carrying 5 to 10 warheads. So it can hit 5 to 10 different targets as it goes down on hypersonic speed. At pangatlo, may mention si Kaana kanina about Guam. Yes. Yung isang dedicated po sa Guam, yung isang modelo ng Dongfeng missile, kaya ang tawag doon ay Guam Killer. So, hindi na talaga safe dito sa Pacific ang Amerika. Kaya kung ako sa kanila, mag-iisip ako, number 1, accept that you are a regional power. At number 2, yung surplus ng revenues mo, gamitin mo sa mga citizens mo, lalo na sa mga mahihirap sa Amerika, which is 14% ang poverty line. Diyan mo gamitin, Mr. Uncle Sam.
Okay, let's go to Maestra Ana before we close the discussion for today.
Ang sa akin po, pagdating sa issue na to, tama kayo, mayroon kasing tinatawag ang Amerika ngayon na bagong, actually this is not a new policy, medyo innovate lang ng konti. Obama has to pivot to Asia, then you have Trump, they call it Indo-Pacific Strategy or IPS, which is now being adopted and carried on by the Biden administration. So, ano ba ang objective na to? Objective nito, basic lang. They have pivot to Asia, sinasabi na they're part of the Indo-Pacific when in fact that's contestable. And ngayon, ang strategy nila is one of that is very obvious, to contain China, because China has a growing influence in Asia and especially in the ASEAN region. And at the same time, dalawa yan, military. So doon tayo mag-ingat. Kasi dapat ang tayo mga Pilipino, maging maingat po tayo sa mga ganitong issue, lalo na when you talk about public opinion. Kasi ang ating mga leaders would always listen to the clamor of the people and the public opinion na nasasagap ng ating mga nasa gobyerno or nasa mga estado natin, no? Kasi very important na maintindihan natin na we should really not put our country in a very compromising situation whatsoever pa ang nandyan. Kasi at the end of the day, dapat nating isipin, hindi tayo dapat matulad sa mga countries like Iraq, Libya, Syria, Afghanistan, and the rest, even South America. There's so many examples of that na dapat po ay maintindihan natin bakit kami nandito, no? Ako, si Mentong, Kado. It's precisely because of this. We want to educate our public and to broaden your perspective and your mind. Na there are a lot of propaganda na kumakalat, but these are not really the truths. So we really have to, do something na makita natin yung katotohanan kasi it will affect our country, it will affect us and the future generation of this country. So dapat maging maingat po tayo na tignan yung mga issue. At kasi ngayon, hindi nila maano yung issue ng South China Sea. Pero take note, the South China Sea is a very crucial area ng Southeast Asia. Precisely because may mga sinasabi nga, yan ang magiging flashpoint. If hindi mag-iingat ang Pilipinas at ang other ASEAN countries sa kanilang steps dun sa banggaan ng dalawang superpowers. So we really have to be a bit more, careful. At public opinion is very important. So sana po yun ang ating tanda.
Maestra Ana Susan Bayabos agrees with you. Sabi niya, let's not be the next US Afghanistan. Okay, and si Florence Eknerol kay Kado naman, tinatakot mo ako. Di kami makapamili ng bakuna dito sa Singapore, Pfizer at Moderna lang. Yung Sinovac ay exclusively sa mga may allergy sa nasangkap ng activated vaccine. Pfizer po na iturok sa akin. Okay lang ito. Very rare po ang mga reaksyong negatibo po dyan. Okay, and there's so many other I would like to read, but it's now past 8 o'clock. Target natin 8 o'clock magtapos kasi yung ating audience napapagod din po. So maraming salamat. I think we have covered a lot today, and it has been a very light session kasi it is a point in history na makahulugan po ang mga nangyayari ulit. And when we are in such a situation, it's so easy to talk about history, and people are very interested. So we will continue again next week, Miyerkules, and we'll see you again. Thank you, Kaado. And siguro you should also say goodbye. Ayun. And Maestra Ana.
Thank you po. At maiiwanan lang sa ating mga kababayan natin. Don't learn from history. Hindi yung matuto sa history ay maulit natin yan.
Okay.
Maraming salamat. Stay safe. Stay safe.
Finally, before I forget yung petition Joshua, meron bang maipo-project po tayo? Ano ulit yung mga paalala tungkol sa petition? Magtulungan po tayo para umabot tayo ng 1,000, and then makaraan po nitong lockdown po natin, ECQ natin, kami magbubuo ng delegasyon na pupunta sa World Health Organization, Manila headquarters dyan sa may Padre Paura at Taft Avenue para ihatid po ang liham natin sa representative dito sa Pilipinas. I don't think we have the time anymore to project the petition, so we'll just do it again next week. Maraming salamat po, and have a good week ahead of you. Be careful. Ingat lang po.